life hacks, leadership tips, stories, and fun. It's time for Two Guys on Stuff with Michael Edwards and Tom Tobin. They're executives, entrepreneurs, and great friends. And this is a conversation about values-based, purpose-driven leadership that can transform you, your organization, and the world. Now, let's hear what stuff the guys are talking about this week.
Welcome back to Two Guys on Stuff. I am Michael Edwards, your host, and I am joined by my good friend and co-host, Tom Tobin. Tom, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. I'm still pumped. Episode 1 went fantastic, or part 1 of our time with Atticus Consulting and Ralph and Lori, and I know that people got a bunch of gold nuggets. It was like mining for gold, with the Moab. So this is great. I'm looking forward to number 2 right here.
Yeah, I agree. The conversation in the first part was amazing. Lots of good nuggets, and I'm kind of excited to see what's out there in the franchise world.
So if everybody recalls, last time we were talking about an introduction to franchising. Why do we want to be a franchisee? What about franchisors? And we introduced our guests to Atticus Consulting, Ralph and Lori, and their experience. Ralph on the franchisee side and growing a multi-unit franchise. Lori working within a single franchisor for 30 years and the benefits that both of them bring. Then Ralph leading a franchisor. So what they do at Atticus is they help people like me back before I knew what I wanted to do or where I wanted to be. And they help walk you through the process at no cost to the potential franchisee. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're watching this and you miss part 1 of this interview, you really need to go back and watch part 1 first, then watch this one, part 2, because not only do we really get a good level set on our mindset going into it, but one of the things that Ralph and Lori do is they help align you with your long-term goals. And that's part of it, but also one of the things that Lori pointed out was making sure that you're being aligned with the type of organization that you want to be with, and making sure that you are prepared for doing what you'd like to be able to do. And in the conversation, we talked about some of the mechanics, but we're going to get into more of the mechanics today. But Atticus Consulting provides these services at no charge to the franchisee, and their goal is to align you successfully with a franchisor. So they're entirely focused on what benefits you most, because it doesn't work for them if they don't help you become a successful franchisee. And that's one of the things that I like, as I see you guys as the bridge over which the entrepreneur can travel to go from where they are today to where their future lies. So I'm really excited for part 2 and to go into some of the mechanics of it. Ralph and Lori, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
Tom, one of the things that I enjoyed about the conversation was the process of figuring it out. Before you go and talk to a franchisee, Ralph and Lori have a really amazing process to make sure that, hey, this is the right thing. I've got the money to do it. I'm willing to work hard to do it. Those kinds of things. So, by the time you get to speak with the franchisor, you're ready to go. You're pumped. You've got all the things. You've spoken with your spouse.
yeah. You guys are in agreement.
Yeah.
That was a good point Ralph made. I thought about that a lot after you said that. I'm like, oh gosh, did I ever talk to Sherry before I started talking to you guys? But I think
we
that's
both know the answer to that.
Yeah, of course. But I do think that that's one of the things is I talked to half a dozen different franchisors before I ever talked to Grease Monkey. And I think about all the wasted conversation and time. And also the built up in fear, like, oh my gosh, this is what I'm gonna have to deal with every time, kind of a thing. And so we're glad to have you guys back to help us take that next step, help take our listeners through that next step of entrepreneurialism, and with a focus on becoming a franchisee. So I think today, Michael, thanks for re-anchoring us to our current focus. And today we're going to discuss a variety of things, but starting off with some funding options. If I'm sitting there and I'm going to be a franchisee, maybe if one of you could go over funding options. Don't have to go into a lot of detail today, but I think it is definitely something that we want to come back to in the future and have some very specific conversation just about things like SBAs or HELOCs or conventional loans or cash, all of the things that could be a potential option, or crossing off the ones that are not options. But if you could kind of go over, those quickly, and then really focus on matchmaking processes for funding and brand alignment. So I'm just gonna tee it off there, and you guys decide where you feel like it would be best routed.
Okay, well,
Ralph?
I'll jump in there. I mean, Laura usually hands off the funding aspects to
Okay.
me when a client is there, and but Lori will kind of tee it up, as you mentioned earlier. When she's aligning a franchisee candidate with a specific brand, she knows that brand's requirements. She knows what the minimum liquidity needs to be. She knows what the minimum net wealth needs to be. The credit score is obviously very, very important. So she's done that research, and she's even gone as far as gone to that franchisor and say, "Hey, I've got a candidate, that's looking in Parker, Colorado. Is this territory available?" Because we don't want to, process a candidate in a market that's already been taken by another franchisee. So she's already teed that up. So typically the franchisors will have lenders that they work with, and it's usually third party. There's a few franchisors out there that will fund certain things like the franchise license agreement, but not necessarily the build out or the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, or the signage, or real estate if you're purchasing real estate. But they will finance the licensing agreement, especially if you're a veteran or a first responder. We work with some franchisors that are very appreciative to those that have served the community or the country, and in that regard. So there are some options out there. But we also work with some lenders and funding partners as well, because we want to get them teed up, because we have candidates that may be looking at 3 different franchises at one time, and to get them pre-qualified, so to speak, is advantageous, because then they know, okay, I've got some understanding about what my options are here. First and foremost, I think, if a candidate has a local relationship with their own bank, typically the franchisor is fine with that. Go ahead and use your own banker. We're good. We want to be a resource for you, not necessarily dictate to you who you have to borrow money from. So, and I think that you'll find that with most franchise models, they're a resource. And if you can, find a better deal than they're giving you, great. But at least they've given you a benchmark to where, it seems like everybody's got a brother-in-law or a cousin in the insurance business, right?
Right.
So, the franchisor says, well, here's the insurance carrier that we suggest, and these are the levels of insurance that you need or require. And if they want to go out and bid that out, great. They already know that the franchisor has done a lot of that homework to try and get them that best deal. So now the brother-in-law or cousin or whoever has to sharpen their pencil to make sure that they're going to get it. They're going to get a good deal. So no different for funding. I personally, I really suggest to folks, if they've got equity in their home, to consider a HELOC. There's a lot of advantages to that. Usually, it's a fixed interest rate. It's a lot cheaper to get into that kind of loan. So you're not paying exorbitant origination fees, application fees, points on points on points. And you can save a lot of money, and you can have access to money as much or as little as you want, because you may not need that much, but you've already got your working capital set aside because you've got that home equity line of credit established. So that's what HELOC stands for, home equity line of credit. We do offer some services. We have 2 different vendors that we work with, or suppliers, I should say, that work specifically with folks that want to do 401k rollovers. And a 401k rollover is a great way to take some of your investment retirement plans and utilize that as basically as collateral. You're required to set up a C corporation. and you end up borrowing against your 401k. So you don't really pay any penalties or interest to the government by utilizing these funds. But it's still somewhat of an expensive venture for you because you need to set up a C corporation, and there are some application fees and processing fees to get that established as well. So, but a lot of folks really go down that route. It's a little less expensive than the SBA. Whichever is the most advantageous. The SBA is usually involved in just about every deal out there as well. Keep in mind that the SBA does not lend money. They guarantee the banks that lend the money. So a bank doesn't want to lend a candidate money unless they've got an SBA guarantee behind it. It's kind of like their insurance policy from the government. And typically the SBA will guarantee up to 75% of how much your client is going to borrow. So so the banks like to have that SBA backed loan to give them that insurance policy, if you will. So, and then there are some certain programs out there as well that I work with a lot of veterans, and there are some lenders out there that work specifically, with veterans and first responders, and they can get some special pricing as well, typically through some of the banks that we work with that offer SBA funding. So those are a couple of the options. There are more out there, but those are the most popular, Tom.
Yeah, I benefited from the use of, it wasn't quite a HELOC because it wasn't a home equity, but it was an asset equity line of credit, and
Right.
that made it very flexible for me, and it was a lot less painful getting loans for the building and equipment. And then later, after everything was said and done, I was operational. I had about 18 months of operations going on. I had cash flow, and then I was able to convert to a normal conventional loan. And so it worked really well for me. But I will tell you, but for a couple of people with expertise in those areas, a brother-in-law, and then people that with my local bank that I was working with, I would have been lost. Like I just wouldn't have known what I was doing. And I used cash for some of what I did. And looking back, I probably shouldn't have. I probably should
Yeah.
have retained that cash. And so if I didn't, since I didn't have your services, I made some decisions that if I could go back, I would change them. So I think that's the thing is to our listener, the value in having these conversations is these are all things that you don't have to worry about what you don't know. You have people that you can work with that know what you don't know, and they're going to educate you. The key is that you have to listen and be, become more educated about the process that you're going through. Any real world examples of, funding successes or pitfalls, things that you've seen where it was people look back and
Yeah.
went, "Oh gosh."
I did, I personally, as a franchisee, I actually built a couple of my own buildings, and I got to the point where I had two SBA loans out there, and SBA loans, they usually float. So in other words, they're going to adjust quarterly, and they're typically 2.5, maybe 2.25 points over prime. So, if the interest rate's going up, you could, your monthly mortgage payment is going to go up as well. So interest rates were starting to climb. I think I'm going back to like 2006, but I had achieved some great value in my home. So I said, well, I'm going to do a HELOC. So I actually was able to do a HELOC and take out both of those SBA loans, so paid them off completely with my home equity line of credit, was able to get a fixed interest rate on that HELOC, and I ended up saving about $3,000 a month. It was phenomenal. But now I own these two commercial properties basically outright because they're not really encumbered by the SBA or the banks that lent the money on them. So then I did basically a line of credits on those commercial properties. And then I was able to buy another commercial property with it. So I
Right.
was starting to leverage some of those assets. So being creative, this is, I don't know if this is a cliche or not. If it is, it is, but if it's not, it's my own personal cliche. And that is the only thing that limits you in some of these funding options and pretty much all business matters is your ability to imagine. So if you can imagine it, ask for it, make it happen. You'd be surprised how people can create things and say, hey, the imagination is the only thing that's holding me back. I need to be able to use some thought process here to try and figure some different ways out and achieve better success.
Generally speaking, how do most people fund their new franchises?
More often than not, it's the 401k rollovers now. A lot of folks coming out of corporate America, either retiring or getting severance packages, or in some cases, unfortunately, getting laid off. They've got a nest egg built in 401k money, so it's pretty accessible, and they can leverage that and get into a franchise pretty quickly. So yeah, that's pretty common.
Okay.
In terms of like you talk about credit score and available capital, do you have an ideal candidate or an average candidate? What does that look like?
Lori, you wanna take that?
So what average, what we look for is a credit score of 680 or higher, a net worth of 250,000 or more, and liquid assets of about 150,000. And so that's what in my initial conversations, that's one of the first questions that I ask is, are you comfortable with that? Do you fall within that range? Because if you don't, then, we might want to take another path and think about some other things.
And that's really good to know. I don't know that a lot of people really understand that I don't have to have $2 million in the bank. 250K in net worth is, I think, within the reach of a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. And we can even lower the liquidity down a little bit. 150 gets it done in a lot of cases that we're working with, but we can get down to 75,000, especially for some of those home-based franchise models where they're not, investing $250,000 in build out to a piece of real estate. So, but if they're running a home model, easy, 75,000 liquid. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're spending 75,000. It's just kind of a prerequisite that the lenders look for. So, and it's certainly not a minimum that we require, but we know that since the lenders are looking for it, we might as well introduce it to the clients and say, hey, this is what the franchisors are going to require from you because their lenders are going to, need these kind of benchmarks to hit. But typically, SBA funded loans are funding at about 80% on furniture, fixtures, and equipment and assets for the business, and up to 90% on real estate, so dirt and construction. So you can get a lot funded through these programs with not having to outlay a lot of cash.
I'm going to go off on a bunny trail for just a second because I think I'm interested, and then we'll talk about the FDD, the franchise disclosure document. We keep calling it the FDD, but that's been getting everybody, probably like, okay, what does it even stand for? What's the acronym? But quick cul-de-sac. Because of the change in the workforce since 2020, there's a lot of people that are looking for home-based businesses. Can you give us one or two examples of your favorite? And you don't necessarily have to name names, but maybe the business model for a home-based business franchise.
Well, one that I really like, and there's probably 5 different models out there. This is not sexy. I'll start off by saying that, okay? But it's pet waste removal.
Really?
The pooper scooper guys that come around and service people's yards that own dogs, but they also get municipalities, town parks, POAs, HOAs, all kinds of commercial business related services for this, and it's highly profitable. There's very low expense to this, and you can run it from your home. So low investment, great return on investment, and again, not sexy, but there's a company that we work with that does payroll, and that can be run from home. Another company we work with that does expense reduction analysis for businesses, another business that can be run from home. And these are companies that do very, very well, and don't need a storefront. They don't need to sign a lease, and they're off and running pretty quickly too. Generally, they're open in 60 to 90 days, so it doesn't take long to get ramped up.
All right. So now
One,
I'm gonna. Oh, go ahead, Lori. Sorry.
well, another one that I like is senior care.
Yeah.
And this is really, it's a hot industry right now because there are so many people, so many seniors now. And one of the things that you could do is help people, help families find a place for your parents. Everybody, it's such an emotional time when they're no longer able to take care of themselves. So you could work in the senior care industry finding places for your parents and your grandparents.
25,000 people a day turn 65 every day.
Oh
It's an
my
amazing
goodness.
stat.
It
Yeah,
is amazing.
you probably
I'm
didn't
like,
know that.
I'm already thinking of the name of my next LLC. That because I would have never thought that.
Yeah.
And especially, well, I understand, but I would have never thought of it as a franchise. And so if you're out there and you're listening, like this is what they bring to you, all these wealth of ideas. I would have never thought of dog poo pickup. But what's funny is yesterday I'm at the grocery store and I buy two big bags of dog food. One's puppy and one is adult dog food because I have two big German shepherds. Zeus is 135 pounds and he's 8 years old, and Athena's almost 80 pounds and she's about 8 months old. And the lady made a comment about, yeah, I've got three big dogs at my house, and every day it seems like I'm picking up, a gallon bucket of poo. And so I'm just sitting here thinking how hilarious that you'd be talking about that today, because I told him, well, I live on some acreage, so I never have to do that. But it's just so funny. But that's the kind of creativity that you bring. So let's say we finally pick, you have walked us through and aligned us with the right industry. And now you're going to set us up in front of some franchisors within an industry to whom you've connected us. What's in the FDD, or the franchise disclosure document, and what do we ask for in terms of validation calls? How do we interpret feedback? Those types of things. Because I think that's critical. And so spend as much time as you need to kind of go through that. What's the FDD? What do we do with it?
So the FDD, the franchise disclosure document, is a document that every franchisor is required to provide to a franchisee candidate. Franchising is regulated by the Federal Trade Commission. That's the governmental entity that oversees the franchise model. So again, every franchise has to provide that to a candidate, and certain states actually are called registration states. I believe there's 18 of them out there, like California, Wisconsin, Michigan, Washington, Maryland, New York, certain states that have their own registration of the FDD. So certain states may require a different language from the franchisors to provide to franchisees. In the disclosure document, rather than chapters, they're actually called items. There's 23 items in the disclosure document. Item 1 would talk about who the ownership group is of the company. Item 2 will talk about the resumes of the folks that are running the company. Who are they? What does their resume look like? Item 3 will talk about any lawsuit that the company's been involved in for the past 10 years. They have to go back and they have to disclose whether they're a plaintiff or a defendant. I'll skip over to item 7, talks about all of the expenses and fees that are associated with getting involved in this franchise model. So it is just an enormous amount of information. Typically, these documents are over 300 pages. A lot of people also will jump to item 19. Item 19 is something that I always like to be cautious about because it's a financial performance representation. But franchisors can typically they can spin that to make it look more appealing than what it may actually be. So obviously P&L information is one of the most important things, but you're not getting in a lot of cases 100% participation of P&L submission from the franchisees to the franchisor. So I think that understanding how many franchisees are participating in those averages is something that you should understand as you're doing some due diligence on the franchise model. So yeah, the franchise disclosure document is required by law. The franchisee candidate must have it a minimum of 14 days before they can actually move forward with requesting a franchise license and being awarded a franchise license from the franchisor. So and very different from the franchise agreement. A lot of the language that's in the franchise disclosure document is, you'll see it in the franchise agreement restipulated as part of the actual contract that you sign. But it really is a wealth of information. There's a lot of minutia in there too. There's some things that it's very boring and you'll skip over. You just don't really care. But then item 20 is maybe one of the most important items to look at. And item 20, it talks a little, it's going to give you a snapshot of every franchisee, what state they're in, their address, their phone number, their email address. It'll tell you if the franchise is growing in the state or shrinking in the state, if stores have been opened or if stores have been closed. And it allows you to start doing a little bit more due diligence in that regard. Why it's important? Because you as a franchisee candidate should be calling up existing franchisees in that system. And you should have your list of questions. I think you want to talk a little bit more about that in detail. But that's where you have all that information. And sometimes franchisors will say, we're going to do a group call, and have some franchisees on the call and have, 8 or 10 different franchisee candidates on the call. So we'll do one big happy group call. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I still think that you want to have, I don't know if you remember, Tom, but when I used to do discovery days with franchisees, I would make all the corporate people leave.
Yes.
Say, everybody out. This is intimate time between the franchisee and the candidates, and I want the franchisee to be comfortable answering whatever questions that those candidates have. So, because I was a franchisee, as I mentioned earlier, and I know what people thinking about on that.
When you gave me about a half a dozen different people's names and contact information for me to call, and that was critical in my decision making. I talked to people like Tyson and Dave Yoakley and Ken up in Lubbock. And so I talked to a bunch of those people. Well, everyone that you gave me on the list, I talked to all of them. And then later I was the one that people were calling when they were considering us as a franchise, considering joining Grease Monkey as a franchisee. And that's one of the things that I always felt was really important, is that you give them the truth. It's like, it's not all peaches and cream. There are some challenges, but I wouldn't go back and change anything. But these are the things that you should be aware of. But that was one of the things that I really enjoyed, was the fact that you guys were super transparent and just said, look, talk to our franchisees offline, talk to them by themselves and see what they say.
Yeah. I like helping people with the questions too, because, your first question should always be, hey, I'm thinking about joining this franchise model. Do you have 15 minutes to spare? Because people are working hard and they're busy. But I always like to ask different questions like, what did you do before you were a franchisee? How many hours a week do you spend in the business? And lead up to, because a lot of people want to dive right into how much money are you making? Is it, are you making 23% of top line gross, and franchisees, they can answer those questions. Franchisors can't. Franchisors can't say, oh, if you buy this franchise model, you're going to make X. That's taboo, but a franchisee having a conversation, they can say whatever they want to say, but it's not the way you start off the conversation. Big believer in the relationship building.
So between the two of you, what are the top 5 questions that you ask? If I'm going through the process and I'm going to talk to a franchisee, considering that I'm going to join that franchise, what are the top 5 that I ask that you think are critical?
I think the top one is, what is the culture like at the corporate headquarters? I think that's super important because you're going to live and work with these people for whatever the length of the contract is. In our case, it was 15 years. So you got to make sure that their culture aligns with yours, with what you believe in. Otherwise, it's going to be a rough, rocky 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't agree more. Lori is spot on. I think that, what's the culture? I also like to follow that up with, has the senior management, what's their vision look like for the next, 18 months to 5 years? Have they shared that with the franchisees? What does their research and development look like for growing the brand and growing products?
Mm-hmm.
How can we add ancillary type sales? I noticed one of the franchises we work with is called OxyFresh, and OxyFresh does essentially carpet cleaning, and they're pretty good. Well, I saw they just rolled out dryer vent cleaning as well as an ancillary product mix, and I'm sure that they tested that with franchisees. But those are important questions. What's the vision look like? And
Right.
and then I follow that up with, okay, so do they do all the things they say they're going to do? Like, how often has your operations manager come by and provided, training face to face, or virtual? I'm okay with virtual training as well if it's applicable, depending on the different brands that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
I even like to drill down into the convention. Did you find the convention to be, just a great time, or did you really get a lot of, material out of it? Was it a learning event for you? I can tell you, Laura used to run the conventions, and boy, nobody does it better. She
Mm-hmm.
was amazing at following up on every single little agenda detail. So,
So, Lori, what about that? Like, how do in terms of going through the details, can you tell us how to read between the lines during validation? Like, as a franchisee, what are some things that are red flags or missteps that new franchisees often miss? And this could either be to you or to both of you.
Um, I think one of the things probably is one of the questions that I always ask is, or would like to ask is, how how responsive are they? How responsive is the franchisor when there's a challenge? If there's an issue, how quickly do they get back to you? Is it
Mm-hmm.
within 24 hours or is it a week? What do they commit to as far as getting back to you? Because, that's really important, especially if you're in a customer service industry and you have an issue and you don't know the answer to it and you're calling the corporate headquarters to try to get an answer. You need to know what to expect because you want to keep that customer. So I think that's probably one of the things you should be aware of as you're talking with a franchisee in the validation process.
Okay. Ralph,
Ralph,
anything
what do you
to add?
think?
yeah, no, that's a great point. You really want to make sure that you first of all, you're asking all these questions, and what Laura just hit on was really critical. But I also think that you can't be one and done. You want to be calling all around the country, different parts of the country, talking to different franchisees, a new franchisee that's been open for 6 months or a year,
Hmm.
and a mature franchisee that's been open for 5 years or 10 years, and get their perspectives on it. And you know what? Some franchisees are not going to validate well. They're going to
Mm-hmm.
say, I'm sick and tired of these guys. That's okay. People are going to have their own opinions, and
Right.
and depending on the franchise model, depending on the franchisee, some franchisees can get lazy, and the franchisor is pushing them to not be lazy, and they're it almost becomes like a parental kind of tug of war
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. I mean, I've had conversations with folks, and again, I go back to my being a franchisee myself. I've had conversations with folks where I sit down with them. I say, let's talk about an exit strategy because you're not happy, and if you're not happy, you're just going to continue to drive this thing into the ground. So
Right.
let's talk about the right exit strategy for you and for the franchisor. And, maybe we can end this on a positive note, but the validation process is such a learning opportunity. And that's really, I mean, if everything is honky-dory and rosy, I'd almost be skeptical on that, to be
Yeah,
honest with you.
It's
exactly.
true.
I like to hear some bad things. Because then I go back to franchise development and the salespeople that are representing the brand and putting you through the sales process and say, I spoke with a candidate, a franchisee during my validation call, and this particular franchisee brought up something that didn't sit well with me, and it's XYZ, whatever that conversation was, and give them the opportunity to expand on that. Say, tell
Hmm.
me, what am I missing here? Is
Right.
is he right? Is he wrong? And all about learning, all about learning.
I think that also draws a picture of the role that the potential franchisee should be in, and they should be in the investigator role. They should
Hmm.
be in the owner seat for, so they have every right to ask those questions. I think oftentimes people are intimidated and they don't, first of all, just by what they don't know, they don't know the questions to ask. And then the other thing is that once they're given the opportunity to ask the questions, they don't. I just have zero tolerance for I should have said, or I wish I could have said, or I was going to say, and I'm always the one they say, well, why didn't you? Like, if you're just both adults and you're speaking to them professionally, why can't you just have that conversation? But in terms of where you are and the position that you just identified for people that are a potential franchisee, it's critical that they take the role of an owner before they ever are. They need to be asking those difficult questions of the people who are trying to sell to them. No different than, if I was going to go buy a car and a salesman was telling me all these great things and all these features about a vehicle, I'd ask them questions to validate it. And so, and your other point is, it's okay to hear negative things. Nobody's going to agree on a movie, but it doesn't mean that you didn't go to it, right? I'm just not investing $100,000 in it. So don't worry about hearing negative or things that aren't all peaches and cream, because that's okay too. I think those are critical things to ask and a critical mindset to have. Michael,
I might even
oh, go ahead.
I might even be concerned if I didn't hear anything negative.
Yeah.
Are they being completely honest with me?
Yeah. Who'd they cue me up to? Right.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you're always going to have them talk to the five best racehorses, but what about the ones I like, to their point, the one that's been there for 6 months and the one that's been there for 20 years, because they both have different perspectives by far. One's been there, they've already worked through all of those challenges. I want to know the person, hey, you're 6 months ahead of me or a year ahead of me. So in 6 or 12 months, I'm going to be in where you are. What's the relationship like with the franchisor? Um, so, Michael, you want to walk us through, like, you've seen a lot of changes in private equity, how that shapes different businesses. You've seen a lot of business transitions. Maybe if you could walk us through a conversation with Ralph and Lori on that, about private equity, the franchising landscape.
Yeah, obviously franchising is growing. In fact, I think I just saw a stat that in 2024, there were about 821,000 franchises in the US and about 8.9 million employees there. And it's growing. The stat talked about multi-unit operators, quick serve restaurants, those kinds of things. But um, you know, the private equity jumping into things, like Blackstone jumped into Jersey Mike's. I'm sure there's a ton of examples of that happening. But in it, so Ralph, what do you think the outlook for the next couple of years in terms of private equity reshaping the franchise landscape?
Yeah, it's been more and more relevant, um, over the past 10 years. And, one of the issues or concerns that I have with private equity is it's a little different culture that they bring to the franchise model than the original founders. They really enjoy the royalty income stream from especially some of the larger, more mature franchise brands. And some private equities, their strategy is to come in and just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job. We're going to give you more resources. We're going to give you more tools, and we want to see you continue to grow. And personally, I love that. So understanding that strategy from the private equity standpoint is fantastic. But I have seen some instances where some private equity investors have come in and they love what they see, but then they change anything anyway. So what was it that attracted you to this business? Usually it's the management team or the way the model is working. But then you came in and you completely disrupted what they were doing. You've changed staff, you've cleaned house, you're trying to drive a certain EBITDA number because really your main goal here is to exit with a profitable flip. And so it's, both sides of the equation. You've got some private equity folks that are coming in and really with the best of intentions. And we just want to make this continue seeing this thing flourish and we want to see it drive more royalty dollars and more EBITDA, in that regard. And we want to be a long-term investor. And some candidly, they come right in and say, look, we're in this for 3 to 5 years. And we want to do what we can to drive our EBITDA and hopefully increase the multiple on the flip and exit with a nice significant return for their investors. So it's a concern. I really still appreciate and enjoy working with models that are still run by private individuals or founders of the company. But when private equity comes calling, they answer the door because sometimes these offers are very, very lucrative. And as founders get up there in age, it's an opportunity for them to exit with a nice pot of gold at the end of the day. So it's something that I think a franchisee candidate should get their arms around, while they're doing their due diligence. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a deal breaker. Some folks who are like, well, what happens if, private equity comes in and, it doesn't really disrupt the franchisees that are in business already operating. They kind of go about doing their own thing and they're working, but it does disrupt some of the things in the corporate office and also the corporate culture, which Lori shed light on before. And I couldn't agree with Lori more. I mean, she hit it spot on. Culture, I think, is really, really important for me as an investor.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that's where I, as a franchisee, I look to the corporate office to be my support and have cultures that are aligned. And if I'm focused on service and suddenly the franchisor is no longer focused on service, but instead, maximizing the bottom line at the expense of everything else, eventually I, as an owner, had to decide this is a service related issue, but this is part of my culture and I need to provide this for my community. And other locations might not do this because it's not the most cost effective thing to do. But I always looked at, but the value of that relationship is so much greater than the $5 I'm going to make today or the $50 I'm going to make today, versus a different mindset where it says, no, you make the $50 today because that relationship isn't guaranteed. Because they're not there every day. They're not serving them coffee when they come in. They don't know their wife and their 2 kids and the fact that the guy just brought his teenage daughter in, or that, 2 ladies that I used to know as Thelma and Louise would come into my bay and, because they're a mother and daughter team. And I always just was like, you're like Thelma and Louise, you're just looking for trouble. And we had this great conversation until literally one day Thelma came in, Louise had passed away. And, and so I prayed with her in the bay. And meanwhile, cars are backing up. And if you all to say this, culture is king. If you don't have aligned cultures, and this is where it's so critical that people connect with with the two of you at Atticus, because you know what cultures are shifting. So if I'm looking at a potential franchisor as the answer to my, my call to franchise, but I don't know that they're in the middle of a private equity,
Yep.
turnover, I could commit to something that 6 months later I'd be going, I would never have done this if I had known that this was the culture that was going to be brought in, So again,
Sure.
just one more reason for our guests that are not our guests, that our listeners, our audience, have to connect with you guys, because again, you're in the customer service business, really. I mean, your function is to connect people to franchisors, but you're in customer service. If your customer isn't happy, you don't get other customers, and there's also, I happen to know the two of you, I think the world of you, and I know how much it hurts when the people that you promise things don't see those promises fulfilled.
That's right.
And so I love that question, Michael, and how it's changed, because it really has changed a lot. Any other things that you've seen in terms of consolidation trends or anything like that, Michael?
That was the big one. Let me go back to my
That amazes
handy
me.
dandy notes.
What'd you say? 825,000 franchisees?
821,000 franchisees, 8.9 million employees.
Yeah.
One of the things that in my research I found was around the multi-unit operators. They really dominate quick serve restaurants, about 82% of quick serve restaurants, and 72% of sit down restaurants, which I thought was interesting. But there's actually a Yale study that I wanted to share. See if I can find it real quick, that talked about how multi-site operators that have two locations, because of the things that they had to do to operate two locations, it opened the door for them to grab a third location. And I'm hoping I can find this quickly. Yeah. It's around the quote from the study, from the Yale study, is the moment a second unit forced shared scheduling and a weekly scorecard, that unlocked unit three. I thought that was pretty amazing that, once you really started having to, I don't know, report, do some shared services on the businesses, then you've got your data, you've got your information, so you can go after your next location.
Yeah. I think that's where economies of scale really kick in too. And it
Yeah.
becomes easier with the third or the fourth.
Yeah.
And they start to shift it, like maybe the fifth, or, things build up, but certainly to add the third or fourth, you've got certain economies of scale that allow you to grow, because you've got people who are now specializing in certain things. So as we're coming up on our close, I don't even want to stop. I just want to keep talking with you guys, partly because I just love you guys, and partly because you just provided us a gold mine for our listeners. So, any final thoughts on the secret sauce for success in terms of persistence, process, people? Is that the secret sauce? Or final advice from Ralph and Lori to aspiring entrepreneurs?
I I guess my piece of advice is do your research. Make sure that the industry, that is something that you want to get into. Make sure you understand the culture. Um, and find people that can help you with that research, because it does take a lot of time. And most people probably have another job that they're working at, or maybe they're unemployed and they need assistance. Well, Atticus Franchise Consulting, we will help you, and there is no fee attached to that. We help do all the legwork and provide you with the background on these brands, so that we can help you start narrowing it down at least. So again, just doing your research and making you understand what it is that you're looking at.
Okay. Ralph?
Yeah, I think that it's not hard to deliver an exceptional customer experience. And secret sauce is just that. If you're taking care of the customer, they're happy, they're going to come back, and they're going to tell their friends. Conversely, if not, they're going to tell their friends not to go there. So I think that, at the end of the day, if you're, we talked about a lot of things, working hard is very important. Giving your employees the tools and the training that they need to be successful, really important. But ultimately, it all boils down to one thing, and that is delivering exceptional customer experience each and every time. And sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes customers can be difficult. I've heard people say, "Oh, sometimes you got to fire a customer." Maybe you do, but there may be repercussions with it. So you have to do your best effort every single day on the front line to make sure whoever you're providing a service to, whoever you're working with, whether it's business to business, business to customer, you have to deliver, and that's what makes you successful at the end of the day.
That's critical. I used to tell my guys, guys, sometimes it's a whole lot, well, not sometimes, it's a whole lot easier to say I'm sorry than it is goodbye.
Right.
And, in all kinds of relationships, right? If only we could do that more often in many aspects of our life, but it's a whole lot easier to say I'm sorry than goodbye. And so sometimes you just blow it and you just own it and you say you're sorry. But if you don't have a relationship to begin with, that's much more difficult. But in our business, you end up having a screw loose. And I don't mean mental, I mean literally. You have a screw loose and oil drains out, and the car gets halfway down the road and they're calling you saying that their car is overheating and that the oil's everywhere. And that happened to us. But we had such a great relationship with this customer, and they knew that it wasn't our plan to do that. They knew that it was a mistake, and we owned it. So we took care of it all. I mean, fortunately, there was no long-term, there wasn't any damage because they pulled over right away. But I gave them my truck for the weekend. We took care of their truck. We took it over to a Ford dealership to make sure that it was checked out and everything was fine. But after it was all said and done, I gave both the husband and wife a gift and said I was sorry and did a handwritten letter. And I didn't have to do that. No. And a lot of places wouldn't have done that. And I'm nobody special, but if you're not someone who wants to drive a culture of excellence, then don't be in business for yourself, because your team is going to, I'm starting to sound a little preachy, I'm sorry, but your team is going to push the line on what culture you create. So if you don't create a strong culture and reinforce it and support it, then they're going to get away with what they want to get away with or what they think they can get away with. And so I think it's really important to follow that advice that you provided, about whether it's hard work or remembering that customer that's in front of you that day and taking care of that one customer, because that one customer, I used to always say this too. I had a lot of little sayings, but every car represents an entire family.
That's right.
And that family represents a block and a community. And so that was how we would have people literally come in and say, and I'm not saying this to brag on me, I'm saying it to brag on my team. They would come in and say, I came only because you have a 5-star rated location, and I've never seen an oil change place that was 5-star rated. And I just wanted to see what that was like. And I would always joke and just say, well, if you leave and you can't give us a 5-star rating, then you need to let me know, because I'm making it happen before you leave. Right. And so as we close up, you guys are such a blessing to me and my family. We love you guys. And I know that you're going to be that same blessing to our listeners. And so if you're listening to this, truly, these are two people who I trusted my family, or I trusted with my family and our future, and they came through in spades. It was super successful, and that you will learn a lot, and you will be blessed if you talk to them. If you're in that time where you just don't know what you're going to do, but you think that you want to own your own business, and in particular, and specifically if you're going into the franchise business, but they'll help you identify whether you're not ready for that too. And that answer is as important as, yeah, we got just the franchise for you, and it's all free.
Free.
No, that's not happening, of course. But yeah, so also, if you're listening, as you guys were talking, I was thinking about, what would it be like if we did like a big Zoom meeting with people that are potential franchisees and invited them to have a Zoom meeting with us offline. Maybe we film part of it, Michael, but we have you guys come back and talk to people who are legitimately in that planning phase. So if you're listening and you want to be on that Zoom call, please identify yourself. Let us know, and you can email us at what, Michael?
MDE@edwardsgrouptx.com.
Or tom.tobinteam@gmail.com, or Michael's advisory group website is
edwardsadvisorygroup.us. That's actually
All right.
the best place. There's a form to fill out, and it'll get to us and schedule time and all that good stuff.
Okay, and for our guests, Ralph, it's Atticus Consulting.
Atticus Franchise Consulting.
AtticusFranchiseConsulting.com.
Right.
And it's ATTICUS. And then we are also going to have a slide in our information for this episode and the one before, part 1. And it's going to have a QR code, right, Lori?
Yes, it will.
And all you have to do is shoot your camera at that. It'll take you to their website and their contact information, and you'll be able to contact them. Is there an 800 number or anything like that you'd like to share?
No, they can.
Go ahead.
We're happy to share our cell phones. It'll be on that slide.
Okay, perfect.
Mine is 303-587-6373. But if they visit AtticusFranchiseConsulting.com, they can click right on there and look at. We have over 600 franchises in our inventory. So anything from senior care to pet care to health to wellness to whatever you could think of, there's a franchise model for it. So they can start exploring some of those franchise models just by looking at our website. But they can also contact us through the website, and just the same kind of deal. Just fill out your name and it'll message us right away, and we'll call you back. So
all right.
Pretty simple.
Ralph and Lori, thank you. Thank you for
Thank
me
you.
just connecting with me and Michael, and for our guests and all the wonderful things that you're going to do for them. We pray that you guys are super successful, and we know that if you are, that's because you've touched a lot of other people and helped them to be successful as well. So thank you so much. Michael, you want to wrap us up and take us out?
Yeah, I want to share our next episode. If we can get all of the stars aligned and the schedules aligned, we'll have Alex Howland with Verbella. We'll actually be interviewing him in his virtual world, so that'll be pretty exciting. But for now, thanks for joining us. This has been Two Guys on Stuff, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to Two Guys on Stuff. Tune in next week as Tom and Michael talk more about leadership stuff, life stuff, helpful stuff, and maybe even your stuff. Until then, keep your stories fun